Oh, look at the nice plumbus. Hey everyone, welcome to the Squanch, Wisecrack's Rick and Morty podcast. My name is Jared, and I'm joined here today with the Squanchers. We got Ryan.
Wubba, what's up?
And we got Dr. Nihilism himself, Michael Burns.
Kirstie Alley.
And it's actually a very special episode of the Squanch today. So first let me introduce my two new guests. We've got Jesse.
Hello.
And Keith.
Hello.
So these guys are from an awesome podcast called A New Player Has Joined, which I was recently on, although they haven't released my episode yet, I imagine, because it's just too good, and they're waiting for the world to be ready.
It's the new Wu-Tang album, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Waiting,
It's too much gold. You can't let it drop at the same
So it's
time,
gonna
or else it'll
sell
drop the podcast economy.
To one person,
Who's like stealing all the AIDS medicine and will listen to that podcast.
I mean, we'll just call it out. Your podcast is only being released to Martin Skrill.
Okay. All right, well, in prison.
Yeah.
So these guys have an awesome video game podcast that you guys should definitely check out. But first, why is this a special episode of The Squanch? If you're watching us on YouTube right now, you might be saying, where are these guys? We are at Starburns Studios, where they did the production and recording of seasons 1 and 2 of Rick and Morty. So if you're watching us, did I say Facebook? I meant YouTube. So if you're watching us on YouTube right now, we are in the room using the microphones that Justin and company used to record seasons 1 and 2 of Rick and Morty.
That's fair.
Right.
So we're like it's like a holy sight.
You can almost smell the belching on this
Yeah,
one.
you can almost smell the alcohol.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're quiet, you can hear burping, right?
Yeah. So my first question is Dan Harmon in today?
He's probably upstairs
Yeah,
somewhere.
he's probably. His office is right upstairs.
His office is upstairs?
Actually, I think his office is downstairs. Over in the bullpen on the side facing Burbank Avenue.
Oh, there you go. He's downstairs.
I don't know.
Is that just like the forbidden zone? You guys never been up there? It's like, executives only?
No, I went up there and I was like, this looks like a DMV, and I went right back downstairs.
So if anyone in the booth, we have donuts down here, so if Dan wants a donut, he can come and join the rest of the podcast. So, we are talking about his show, by the way. So this is an interesting episode of The Squanch. We're talking in Dan Harmon's basement about his show.
Yeah.
And we would love it if he would come down and join us. So if you're listening...
Say some really inflammatory stuff so that he angrily comes down to shut us down.
If you're listening, if you're on YouTube right now and listening to us broadcast this live, please tweet Dan Harmon and just tell him to go downstairs. Mm-hmm. Tell him to go downstairs.
Tell him to go downstairs. But if he's on the first floor, he'll be very confused.
I hope he's at his house and he's like, what's going to happen to me if I go into my basement?
Right.
We're in your basement, Dan Harmon.
Right. So we are in Dan Harmon's recording studio. Someone please let Dan Harmon know. Anyway, so today we are breaking down Season 1, Episode 7 of Rick and Morty called Raising Gazorpazorp. So I'm going to go around and, as always, get some first impressions. What was it like revisiting this episode, and what was it like the first time you watched it? We're going to start with Ryan.
Well, this is a weird episode because it's one I rarely revisit it, but it's pretty damn funny. First time I saw it, B+. This time, B+.
All right. Solid. And Mr. Nihilism. I'm sorry, Dr. Nihilism. He's got a PhD. I'm sorry.
I found this episode, it's kind of like wedding food. And that it's enjoyable, but I'm not going to write a journal entry about it or remember it fondly. It was all right.
All right, Jesse.
This is actually the first ever episode of Rick and Morty that I saw.
Very first.
And when I first saw it, I was like, well, this show's hilarious. I have to check out more. And then after watching the entire show and coming back, because I also never revisit this one, watching this one, I was like, oh, this is maybe my least favorite Rick and Morty episode.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I'm always excited by any kind of superlative, so I can't wait to hear why you don't like it. Yeah.
We'll get into it.
Okay, cool.
But here's the thing. It still makes me laugh very hard at a good number of moments. It just doesn't hold up compared to the rest of the series.
Sure. And Keith?
Yeah, I feel sort of the same way as Jesse. I think when I first saw it, I was laughing so hard. But after watching more of the series, you go back to it and you're like, yeah, this is like a first season episode. This is an episode of the show's trying to figure itself out, and it's a great way to show who Rick is as a person. But I think it was definitely a B episode.
Oh, this will get Dan down.
Yeah, Dan is not coming down.
He'll come down and be like, your podcast is off for an hour.
Well, it was better than any episode of Community.
What?
Yo, you watch your mouth. You watch your mouth.
I was trying to lure him here.
So I guess I'm pretty much with the rest of you guys. I think that it's a middle shelf episode, which is still great television, and I do find myself laughing a lot. I mean, it's a lot of like gender-charged humor, which is always fun. And
in 2018, that's what the people want.
That's what the people want. Gender-charged humor. And I mean, I have to say, Zardoz is actually one of my favorite camp movies.
Okay, that'll do it.
And so I appreciate the illusion. I would have preferred that they went a little bit deeper with it, but of course that's not their top priority.
You wanted the outfit.
I wanted Sean Connery outfit, absolutely. And I went into the credits and I was really hoping there would be like a guest voiced by Charlotte Rampling, because I just can't get enough of her. But anyway, let me go into the recap of the episode. So, Morty is having a grand old time with his new high-tech sex robot that Rick purchased him from a pawn shop in space, until it gets pregnant. Seconds later, Morty Jr. is born, Morty's half-human, half-Gazorpian son. So Rick and Summer travel to his native land of Gazorpazorp to find more suitable parents for Morty Jr. When one of the Gazorpians breaks Rick's portal gun in pursuit of Summer, Rick quickly takes over the planet and enslaves all the beasts. When a giant floating godhead appears, Rick and Summer get inside the head, where they learn that Gazorpazorp is actually ruled by a technologically advanced class of women who use the head to control the highly destructive Gazorpian males, and use them only as a means for reproduction. Meanwhile, Beth and Jerry throw shade at each other's parenting skills while Morty tries to raise Morty Jr., who, even in his early days, seems only focused on death and destruction. Believing Rick to be Summer's slave, they are introduced to Marsha, the leader of Gazorpazorp. The deception doesn't last long, though. Marsha hears Summer use the patriarchal term grandpa, and Rick lets out a huge fart, the punishment of which is death. Moments before their execution, Summer reveals that the top that everyone has been fawning over was made by a man. The matriarchs are forced to admit their mistake and release them. Back at the Smith home, Morty Jr. is well into his angsty teen phase. When things get heated with Morty, Morty Jr. runs away from home and starts terrorizing the neighborhood. Morty, Rick, and Summer find Morty Jr. and Morty, Rick, and Summer find Morty Jr., and Morty convinces his son to take all his destructive impulses and channel it into something creative. Morty Jr. decides it's finally time to leave the nest and gets his own place. Rick and Summer come to the conclusion they've learned nothing about gender politics, and Rick farts. This time the family laughs, suggesting there is hope for this planet. After the credits, Morty Jr. is on national TV promoting his book entitled My Horrible Father. End of episode.
Can I just say, this is why Rick and Morty's so amazing. No way this gets pitched anywhere else and people actually listen to it. Like, no one actually will sit in a room and like pitch this TV show to somebody and they'll be like, yes, like we will definitely take that. They're like, what are you saying to me? That's why the show is so phenomenal.
Yeah. So let's start off. First of all, give me 1 second. So, all right, the first thing I want to talk about is one of my favorite camp classic movies, Zardoz, which I already mentioned. So, for those of you
John Boorman?
John Boorman. You know, this was back in the Hollywood days when if you won a Best Picture Oscar, the studios would just let you do whatever you want, even if your name isn't Christopher Nolan.
Yeah.
And so I think John Boorman made Deliverance, which won Best Picture, which is actually one of my favorite movies. And then they said, all right, John Boorman, here's a blank check, make whatever you want. And he said, I want to make this like bizarre, existential, psychedelic, like story about exploited population and elite overlords.
It's like a mythical dystopian future kind of a movie, right?
Right. So the reason I'm bringing this up is that when the head comes to the male Gazorpians and starts feeding them the sex robots, the head is from Zardoz.
Yes.
And except in Zardoz, the head is spitting out guns, and he says the gun is good, the penis is evil, and basically what's happening in Zardoz is that there's this elite society that uses this godhead to create this false god that makes the savages grow food for the elite population, but also they just suspend them in this state of constant warfare where they're constantly killing each other. They leave them completely uneducated and leave them to be savages. But then in the elite society, they have this aimless existence where they're all just overtaken with this like existential restlessness, and they all can't find any purpose in life. Their life is wholly full of abundance, and they just can't find any meaning, and their lives are miserable. And that's actually one of my favorite elements of that movie is there is like even this class of people called, I can't remember what they're called, but basically there is this whole class of people that just stand numbed.
Yeah.
They don't move. They're catatonic because with all this abundance, with all their desires fulfilled, they literally have no will to do anything. So that's one of the most interesting things in Zardoz. I wish it was like, so, you know, the Zardoz equivalent is like these females who, you know, lord over the male Gazorpians and, you know, just use them for their reproductive capabilities, which is funny. And you can kind of see how the costumes are sort of like the female costumes are kind of modeled after the Zardoz society, but pretty much just ends there. Which one of you guys have seen Zardoz?
I've never seen Zardoz. I just read up about it as soon as because I was like, well, this giant floating head has to be something.
Right.
And then looked into it. I know the reference to the Sean Connery outfit, and I read the Wikipedia and I went, oh man, I'm never watching this movie.
I mean, unironically, you should, like, because I mean, if you appreciate camp, if you like campy movies, if you can have fun with something like that, I mean, it actually has a lot of really good thought behind it. It's a very smart movie. It's not it's not dramatized in any kind of serious manner.
Yeah. It is pretty slow though and hard to watch for people not like familiar with that kind of movie. I like it a lot, but also retraction from Jared a second ago. Deliverance did not win Best Picture.
Oh, it didn't. I'm sorry.
A little movie called The Godfather did that year.
Oh. Yeah. Well, fuck me.
It just made $1 billion and was a huge box office hit.
It was?
Yeah.
Can you imagine something like Deliverance making a bunch of money these days?
Yeah.
No way.
No, of course not.
Okay, so I was totally wrong. Did it win other awards?
I'm pretty sure it won like screenplay, or I think one of the actors. I think maybe Ned Beatty won I don't know actually, but I know it won. It got nominated for a lot of stuff.
Yeah, they didn't do the Nickelodeon Awards that year.
Yeah. Did it win Best Kiss?
Oh my god.
All right, so let's talk about the Gazorpian Society. One of my favorite parts of this episode that I didn't really remember from the previous time I watched it is that, so first of all, the whole reason why there's conflict when Rick and Summer get to Gazorpazorp is because the Gazorpians see Summer and they're like, oh my god, a female must rape, basically. And so one of my favorite parts is that like Rick just says, God, now I have to enslave a whole planet. And then it cuts to a very short scene with Morty trying to father Morty Jr. And then it cuts back and there are these flags that adorn the whole Gazorpian society of like a crudely drawn face of Rick. He's already established himself as a tyrant, as an authoritarian, maybe as like, you know, some sort of god figure. And those are kind of my favorite parts in Rick and Morty. We see another instance of this at the beginning of season 3, episode 2, when Rick introduces electricity to the Mad Max land. It just cuts to them in this advanced suburban, miserable, alienated civilization.
Well, it treats its viewers as smart. It's like, you get it. We don't have to do a time jump, and it's like, you understand it. We don't have to explain this to you.
Yeah, and those are like the really rewarding details that I really appreciate. So I find another thing interesting that the Gazorpians are like, they're like the epitome of the male id.
They're like monkeys.
Right.
They're just like, they just want to attack, kill, like have sex.
Do you guys think that, so obviously there's a lot of like, the joke here is that the Gazorpians represent the worst of like the male psyche, right? Yeah. Do we feel the same way that the female Gazorpians represent the worst of the female psyche, or do we think that the show is more forgiving and more sensitive towards females?
Ooh. This one's tough. Part of the issue with this for me is the animation style in this, because the Gazorpian males are made to look completely monstrous.
Right.
And the Gazorpian females are made to look humanoid with just extra arms growing out of them.
Right.
So it makes it easier.
all very beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. The one line in this that gets me is Rick being like, "Oh, the classic Amazonian twist. We're doing this." So when you get to the female population, it feels that it's not, we're making fun of women and then over here we're making fun of men. It feels like we're making fun of women and over here we're making fun of aliens. So that's kind of where the disconnect for me happens in watching this episode. Is I'm like, we have the representation of male id, and it's so far removed from actual men that it doesn't feel like you're punching at men. And then when we have the female representation, it's so close to actual female representation that it feels like we are punching down at a few times at the female representation in this episode.
Because also the men are they're mostly just doing one thing. They're not talking. They're just attacking and trying to have sex. And the females is constant talking. So there's a back and forth.
Yeah,
jokes to be made.
And all the female references are so specific.
Yeah, exactly.
And kind of like stereotypical things.
There's some tropes in there.
Because there's a few moments I kind of found myself being like, oh,
right,
you could do better than
exactly.
that.
Like, we were talking about this on the way here. There are a few stores that they show in the background as they're walking through that are like, just chocolate and shoes, and I'll just have a bite of what you order. And it feels like if you're gonna make fun of the female side, you should make fun of like the societal side. Like we were talking about having a store that's titled 70 cents to the dollar store instead.
Well,
so
they do make that joke.
They make that joke later
but
on.
doesn't Summer have to bring it up?
Summer has to. Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's because they don't know what Earth is like.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
See, when I see those jokes in the video that you're talking about, like the kind of eye rolling ones, to me it's almost like they're making fun of how cliche and stupid and ubiquitous they are. And just bringing them up and kind of having them there is almost
I believe that they
from
aim
Rick's
for that.
point of view is
it's like they're making fun of people who make those tropes.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it feels like they're aiming for. I don't know if they get there all the time, but I get the intention.
I just don't know if it plays well right now.
You never see that.
See, okay, so to Mike's point of it not playing well right now, I mean, I sort of agree.
Yeah.
I guess what I would say is I actually think that the episode, I mean, it's not the most balanced thing in the world, but I would actually argue that they characterize. So one example is like, so for example, when Rick and Summer get to the planet at first, in order to get the Gazorpians to not molest Summer,
they have to kill them.
Well, not only that, but he tells Summer, put on a fucking burqa.
I know, yeah.
So I mean that is a bit charged, and it like kind of harkens back to like some countries in the Middle East in which like there is this prevailing logic that a woman has to conceal her body or else a man cannot control himself.
Yeah, that men are so irresponsible with their sexuality that it's just like they're a danger to women everywhere.
Right, and so when you said that they should have pointed the female humor to be more of a societal thing, I guess I kind of disagree because I think that, there's this hot term in college campuses and philosophy that I try as hard as I can to avoid, and it's essentialisms.
Okay.
And I think that in both cases the comedy is drawn from what people call like essentialist characteristics. So
what's essentialisms?
So essentialism is the idea that like, oh, I'm a man, therefore I'm violent at heart, that there's like something essential to my nature, to my biological nature that makes me violent. And that's what this episode is making fun of. It's saying that, like we're making fun. I'm not even saying we're trivializing the notion necessarily, but we're just, using as a source of comedy the essentialist notion that men are all like rapists at heart and they're all violent at heart. But at the same time, they're making fun of women because women are, like catty at heart, and they, turn on each other, and like they like things like hugs and, oh, well, I'm here if you want to talk kind of stuff. And they focus on trivial things like bangs. And so I don't know. I kind of find that refreshing that, like, they make fun of, instead of, I mean, there are, like, especially from Summer's character, she kind of brings more of the social elements to the fore when she talks about, things happening on Earth. And then there's the line of, like, you can go back to Earth where women are equal but not really.
Yeah, we're your strange planet.
But when it comes to Gazorpazorp, I think one of the reasons why Gazorpazorp is so funny is because it's making fun of, like, the worst quote-unquote essentialisms of men and the worst ones of women.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I just think, for me personally, it is the actual physical representations they show that skew it that skew it in one direction, where I'm like, it would be, because in Zardoz, they're just people. They're just like men, and they're dressed stupid. And I feel like if they had gone for that, it would have made it easier, but it would have made the B plot harder to make Morty Jr. seem as violent and threatening and alien as he is.
Yeah.
So there's this weird middle ground where it's like, if you had just drawn them to look more humanoid, I think this would have felt closer to accurate to making fun of both of those essentialisms.
Right. So I want to bring up one of the quotes that Rick says before they realize what's really happening on Gazorpazorp. So Summer asks, why is this such a sausage planet, and how did such backwards idiots invent robots? And then Rick's answer is, obviously at some point the Gazorpians became so evolved that they replaced Excuse me. Let me take that again. He says, obviously at some point the Gazorpians became so evolved that they replaced females with birthing machines. The resultant lack of distraction and hand pecking allowed them to focus entirely on war. So they bombed themselves back to the Stone Age. Now they just fight with each other over fake pussy and sticks and rocks all day long. And then Summer says, "You think it's efficient to get rid of women?" And Rick says, "You ever see a line for the men's room?" No, of course, this is another like classic essentialist joke. I mean,
that's the thing about it is like what Rick just said before he made that women's joke. He just said a bunch of smart, really funny things, and then he made like basically a sexist joke towards to top it off. To like top it off, so it's like he punched down at that one moment just on her when he could have punched up.
But it's Rick, though. You know,
I know
it's the same
Rick.
as Cartman making it.
Oh, absolutely.
But hold on, why is that punching down to say that there are longer lines for the bathroom for women? Like, I mean. Why is that punching down?
It's just kind of like an overused trope.
Yeah.
It's one of those things we have a tendency in society to make fun of women for things that we've imposed upon them. So it's like, oh, women are always like doing their makeup in the bathroom. It's like, well, yeah, because they're told if they're not pretty, nobody's going to love them and they're going to
right, but like societal factors don't make them pee. You know,
right?
Right, but it's not the act of peeing that like is the line thing. It's one of those tropes that it's just been used to marginalize an entire gender, and it's like it's one thing for them to poke fun at Rick for being wrong about it, but this episode doesn't fully get there. Instead, it leans on what the show does a lot, which is the idea that like Rick will never learn because Rick understands so much, which is fun. But at a certain point, if you're going to punch down at an entire gender, you need to have him, and I hate saying this, but like learn something or at least admit something that he knows.
Yeah.
So you would say that the portrayal of the Gazorpians is punching up?
I would say that it's hard to punch down at a gender that's been on top for thousands and thousands of years.
Like I don't think anyone's worried about the representations of.
Yeah.
Actually, no. There's someone on the internet who is worried.
There's always somebody who's worried about something.
What about me? But I think.
I think that a lot of these the characterizations of men here are fun. I mean, I love that at the beginning. Morty has this insatiable lust for a sex doll.
I thought
just
that was so
boning
funny.
all
So
day.
funny.
That's the
The
best
breakfast
part.
scene is incredible.
It gives rise to one of my favorite subtle jokes the series actually ever does, where when Rick runs upstairs and Summer's like, we're not going to stop this. And Beth's like, all right, well, now if we hear the springs, we stop it. And then when they're jumping around, they run, they're like, this has to stop. It's like just the implication of that is phenomenal writing.
Tag teaming the robot.
Yeah.
Well, there's a line right after, I think it's right after the line you said,
Oh, sure.
that I thought, well, maybe you were about to get there, so I'm stepping on your lovely toes.
No.
They are very lovely, by
You
the
don't
way.
know what my toes look like. Don't worry.
I have a foot thing, and Jared's the final frontier. There's a line where Rick says something like, the lower tiers of this society is being manipulated through sex and advanced technology by a hidden ruling class. Sound familiar? And I thought that was really smart because like it came right after some of the like punching down gender stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, there's like the Rick and Morty shit I like.
So you're saying sound? Your point you're trying to make is sound familiar is referencing Earth.
Yes?
Yeah.
See, the funny thing is, I thought it was just talking about Zardoz.
Oh.
Because I mean, they enter the head, which
Right.
is like you know, and he talks about like manipulating people through sex and which is exactly what happens in Zardoz. I mean, I think that your reading is accurate,
Interesting.
Yeah.
but that just never crossed my mind
You wanted it
because
to be the movie, or you saw it as being a reference to the actual film.
well, I mean, because this is what happens in the movie,
Yeah,
and they're
they-
inside the head,
and because Rick and Morty is notorious for crossing the fourth wall. In fact, they do it to end this episode. So
they
that's
do it a bunch of
definitely-
times in this episode.
definitely a
yeah. No,
possibility.
but I think that's interesting.
Going back to the punching down thing, that like in the South Park reference I made, like what do you guys think about? Just for a tangent, like you know, like if
There's a South Park reference in this.
Well, no, I just said it a second ago. When
He said Cartman.
When Cartman makes like just totally awful,
racist,
jokes,
terrible.
sexist jokes.
Wendy was
like,
created to balance him out, and every episode Cartman gets his ass kicked.
Yeah.
Like
Wendy's
that's
a
every episode.
kid. I
Okay,
think for
so
some,
that's
he's like
the
a
point.
little.
So he
he's
never
like a
learns
fat kid
anything,
that no one
though.
likes.
No, he doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and so I guess in that, I mean, to me, like Rick saying these kind of punching down jokes to me is totally like.
That's Rick. That's who
yeah,
he is.
exactly.
Yeah,
That's
and-
that
and
guy,
Rick
you
is
know?
not a role model.
No,
No,
he's not at all.
exactly.
No,
And
nor
they make
nor
that-
is Cartman. I'm just going
Right.
back to your point that South Park does, though, every episode end with, we're going to point out what the truth is and how you should
We're just
act.
gonna say
Other
fuck
people
Cartman.
pointing it out for the
that
audience,
person, right,
But
yeah.
Cartman never.
No, he never
Yeah.
does it. He
No.
never
So-
learns. Yeah.
I think part of it for me is that like Rick is so intelligent.
Yeah. Right.
He is the epitome of intergalactic intelligence. He is the end-all, be-all of knowing things. And so to have him end with, like, I'm just going to fart literally and figuratively all over, like, half of the population, it's like, it feels... I get why they do it. I get that it establishes his character more. I get that it helps in the breaking the fourth wall nature of what the show does. But it also feels just like there were so many instances in this episode where they talked about gender in a very funny and intelligent way. So I know they're capable of a little bit more than this.
It's that why the reason all of us subconsciously are like, it's not one of their better episodes.
Yeah.
I feel like, you know what I mean? Like, we have felt 100% of certain episodes where, like, this is just smart and funny and everything's hitting right now.
Because it's new.
Yeah.
I remember when I saw the Memory Parasites episode, and Sleepy Gary has that moment with Jerry where there are no more parasites that are entered into a thought. They just have, like, a romantic moment. And I was like, I've never seen that.
Yeah.
But in this episode, there are a lot of moments of I've never seen that, but there are also a handful of moments of I've seen this so many times.
Yeah.
That even if you're doing a trope of the trope, all I see is the trope.
Well, like the entirety of 90s comedy was a lot lot of
that.
Like
Exactly.
schlubby dudes talking about how women like chocolate and make fun of bangs and stuff.
And so it felt like they were going to make fun of that trope, but instead they just ended up falling into that trope.
Gotcha.
So there's one point that I thought was pretty subtle that I think is a very strong point. Basically, so right after Rick says this line where they go on to the head and he says that it's like a ruling class manipulated by sex, sound familiar, and then the two hooded figures step further, and he very explicitly says,
Bro.
"Hey man, I like what the work you're doing here, bro,
yeah.
brother." he just like he equates domination with men.
Yeah. That was a slick
so
move.
in that sense, I do think that they are subverting the trope a little bit.
Yeah,
Right.
oh no, they definitely. I
That's
don't
the
wanna...
thing. They just don't get to go complete circle.
Yeah.
It's like right before they get to complete circle, they don't get there, and it's
They
like
lean into a joke that's been done a few times right before they get full circle, and that's why it's frustrating. Is because I'm like, I know that the intention behind this is good and that it's funny, smart writing because it's Rick and Morty.
Yeah.
I just want
So
them
let
to
me
get
ask
all
you
the way
something.
there.
Like when there are these jokes that punch down, I'm just curious about like kind of the way that your brain functions when you think about these jokes. Let's say that, for example, the bangs joke.
Yeah.
Maybe is that not one that you find to be overusing the trope? Or
No,
is
that joke actually that's one of the funnier lines in this one to me, when it's like, you have been sentenced to having bad bangs, and then somebody behind her goes, it's always the ones with three names that have bad bangs.
That was funny.
That's a very like I've never
Okay,
heard
so
that
you
joke
like
before, at
like
least.
that one. What's one of the ones that you thought was overly?
I thought the store names were kind of
okay,
like
the store names. So like when you see the store name, like, so for example, one is called, it's a restaurant in the background of the female Gazorpian society called Just a Bite of Hers, for people who don't remember. Do you look at that and say to yourself, oh, that's funny, and then you check yourself and say, no, wait, now I'm kind of reviewing this under the social conditions that I understand that joke arose from, and now I'm stepping back with a critical lens saying that they could have done better?
Yeah,
or is it just not funny to you?
it's just you've seen it so many times.
Yeah.
Like that's
I think
the
it's
thing.
not funny.
It's just not funny anymore. Like it was funny 10, 15 years ago when I just didn't understand or really, and then years go on, you're like, yeah, I've heard that joke way too many times.
I guess the reason why it was funny to me is because I do think that this is a fresh context.
Yeah.
Like, we have this foreign, alien society of women who, have this peaceful society.
Yeah.
So I think this is a new context. It's not just like a bunch of guys on the couch saying like, "Oh man, all women are like."
Not at all. It's not at all.
Those
that.
fucking bathroom lines,
It's
man.
not at all that. No.
But I think that's the problem then, that it gets so far towards not being that.
Yeah.
And like we all know that the writers who write the show aren't that.
Right.
So I think it's almost like being held to a higher standard.
Sorry, what is that?
Oh, fuck, I don't know.
Carlos Mencia.
Carlos Mencia.
Oh, Carlos
When was the last
Mencia.
time he was on the air?
That's what I'm saying. It's like just those jokes are just like, we've seen this, we've
Yeah.
heard this. Like,
But Carlos Mencia was old even when he was on the
Yeah.
air.
Well, yeah, it's because he was doing Cosby.
No, but it's like it's a matter of standards. Like if I
Yeah.
go to Taco Bell, I have one set of expectations, so it's
Yeah.
gonna be hard to let me down. If I go to like a really lovely place and they serve me shit, then I'm like, I know you guys are better than this.
Yeah,
Right.
I guess they
what
just
I-
serve me decent. I'm like, this is my Rick and Morty
Yeah.
is my
I
gold
guess that's the
standard.
point. It's like decent at a good
Yeah,
place.
I guess what I'm saying is it's like, for me, it doesn't bother me that much because it's old, tired jokes, but wrapped in a nice,
Yeah.
new, novel Rick and Morty way.
Yeah.
They do it in such a smart way because Rick and Morty's a smart show and they
Right.
do such a good job, and the jokes in Rick and Morty are phenomenal. But that's all it is. Like, I went and watched this episode last night and I just rewatched it. I was like, oh, this is funny, and then there's just a couple jokes. I was like, oof. Like, that just hasn't aged well in the past. Like,
Yeah.
You said something to me that I thought was really poignant, which is just like, this show is great, and if you ever wanted your girlfriend to like it as much as you do, this isn't the episode you'd show her first.
Yeah, don't show her this episode first because she'd be like, there's a couple jokes in there that weren't really,
that didn't stick with
I
me.
want to test this. It's just a shame that we don't have any women here.
To answer your question though, Jared, I do because me personally it doesn't bother me, but I do think that like one of those jokes. It's kind of like a natural reaction. You're just kind of like, you hear it and you're like, ooh, like it doesn't. You're like, wait, why did that feel weird for me?
Because it's old
and then,
comedy.
Yeah.
Well, right, but it's kind of like, you know, the first example you said like do you hear it and laugh and then you take a step back? I don't think anyone really does that. It's more just
No.
like you feel it and like, wait, why did that feel weird? And then you kind of psychoanalyze it.
Yeah.
So I want to jump to the end here.
Yeah.
Do it.
And we're going to talk about... God, this part was so weird. This was the most Family Guy element of the show.
Are we
going to
talk about the dance scene from Footloose?
No. I was gonna talk about, we can talk about that later. I was going to talk about the Brad Anderson Marmaduke section.
Yeah.
Oh,
yes.
yes.
Very Family Guy.
Yeah, it was
Very Family Guy. Just completely inane and random.
Okay, yeah. This is a thing that I don't think I've said explicitly yet. This episode feels like it was written, and then they're like, well, we could stick this anywhere in the first season, and let's stick it between two strong episodes. Because there's a bunch of... This is a filler episode.
It is.
It doesn't affect the plot of anything. Prime example, Summer gets a spacecraft, and we never see that spacecraft ever again.
A pretty pink one.
A pretty pink spacecraft, and we never see it again, and so it just feels like the writers wrote this as a one-off, and they were like, okay, it wasn't bad. I still like this episode, but it wasn't our best. So let's just kind of shelf this, and because it's filled with these Marmaduke moments where you're like, where did this come from?
Right. It's rare that Rick and Morty does a joke like that that's so random.
Yeah.
You know, and just random for the sake of being random. Usually
Exactly.
there is some thought put
Oh,
behind these
everything
things.
in the
Yeah.
show is earned painstakingly, and it's wonderful.
Yeah.
And this joke, while it made me laugh to have Jerry's response be like, was that so-and-so from Marmaduke? It was like,
Yeah.
of course, because that fits Jerry's character.
Right.
It was still like, you guys stop serving us Taco Bell at this restaurant. You guys are so good. You're so good.
Right. So I guess the two, if we could say, like, salvation moments of the episode. So one is is part of this Brad Anderson thing where we see that Morty Jr. is this violent, seeming, hopeless being, and Rick wants to kill him, but instead the conclusion is that he should put his efforts towards something creative, which Dr. Nihilism was just telling me on the way over here that he's more of a Freudian than a Jungian, and so, like,
I'm a fun guy going road trips.
Yeah.
You guys, I don't know if you're ever like busy.
Is that why you tried to jump out of that car?
So this brought to mind, like, the Freudian concept of sublimation.
Yeah.
And I'm curious.
What is that? Sorry.
It's basically what I said. Is it's taking, like, these more like
desires,
these violent impulses, these negative impulses, and then, like, taking them and turning it into something creative or productive.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And do you guys interpret that as just kind of like in a sense, is the episode just saying that, like, there will always be this element of men, and that the answer is for them to sublimate it? Or did this cross your mind ever when you were watching the episode, Michael?
It did, and at that moment, I thought about that part, and I thought about that sort of a trope of the tortured male artist, or like the male creative who gets to be kind of a dick.
Yeah.
And, like, gets to day drink too much, and maybe is, like, shitty.
By the way,
towards
Dan
one
Harmon, you should come down.
I love day drinking, so I'm not gonna judge that at all. But I think there's, like, a thing that I'm sure people in this room, I know I've fallen into that trap of thinking that before. So it was another line where I was kind of like, okay.
Right.
I don't know.
But then on the same, like, the other point of kind of salvation is that Rick farts, and then Beth and Summer laugh.
Yeah.
And I think almost I could make an argument that this is kind of more to the way Ryan and I are interpreting the episode. Is that the point that Rick makes at the end is like, hey, I farted. It's crude. It's old humor.
Yeah.
But fuck it. There's still hope for this planet if we can still laugh at stupid
But
shit.
fuck it.
Yeah. That was...
I did it.
That was the... that moment was when I was like, all right, I see what you're doing. Because it literally is just fart. See you next week. Wubba-lubba-dub-dub.
Yeah, Rick's like, whatever.
I thought that was great.
In general, like the whole breaking the fourth wall, see you next week, I'm not a big fan of those endings, but
I love them.
I thought when they did it in the pilot, that was when I was like, I'm going to watch this show forever.
I like the fart element.
I love it.
I'm very critical of breaking the fourth wall in general, unless it's
you have to earn
necessary.
it.
What about the jokes what they make offhandedly? Like they do that
the
throughout
Conan
the whole
thing.
show. Yeah, the Conan thing.
Again, the memory parasite, just like Hammer Eye and Amish Cyborg. What is this, 90s Conan?
Oh yeah, or we're doing we're doing the Amazon woman thing again.
Yeah,
They do little things like that where they're like, we're fully aware we're on a TV show.
Or like the OJ thing was funny, I thought, in this one.
What was the OJ
Where
thing?
Summer basically uses a Johnny Cochran defense.
Oh yeah. If the top
if the top is cute, you cannot.
Yeah, that was great.
I loved that.
That line
was
I thought
great.
was awesome.
Well, I think that's especially hilarious because Summer's argument as to why they should go doesn't make sense.
No.
Like, I actually wrote it down because I wanted to hear what you guys think. Like, why do they let him go? So, let me just read the whole thing. So it says Mark Jacobs. Mark Jacob? These are names of the penis. Good line.
That's a great line.
Good line.
It's a great line.
And then Summer says, yes, an Earth man made this top. Maybe on your planet, separation of genders is the right thing to do, but on Earth, a certain percentage of males are born gay, which is why my clothes are better than all of yours. And then Marsha, which, by the way, the name Marsha is so good because her name is just Marsha.
Yeah, exactly. But they made it an alien-esque. Marsha.
Yeah.
Can we point out that gay men just save straight men in this show? Like
Yeah.
a gay man secretly saves straight men.
So she says, it's true, and sometimes the truth hurts, but it must be accepted. Like if I told you that you're using the wrong color foundation for your skin, and it ends at your neck, making you look like a party clown.
Yep.
And then Summer says, okay, ouch, noted.
See, that's
But the fact
funny.
remains, no, it's funny, but he says, okay, ouch, noted, but the fact remains, if you impose Gazorpazorp's laws on Earth, you're no better than the men whose farts shall remain unspoken, and if you think my top is cute, you cannot execute.
Listen,
you cannot impose laws on Earth, then you're no better than... What does that mean? Like, is she just saying, like, hey, we're Earth... I mean, first of all, I think if the... I'm being, like, overly critical here, but if the word
No, I
was
love
just
it.
changed to laws on Earthlings, then it would make sense. but they're not actually trying to impose Gazorpazorp law on
Syntax,
Earth.
diction, very important.
There's no indication that they
You'd be
wanted
really
to colonize
good
Earth.
legal counsel if that was a real place.
If I actually wanted to make money, maybe I'll go to law school.
The amount of times that's been said in this podcast booth.
And Matt, you should every time you go up to the judge be like, I don't want to be too critical here.
Your Honor, I don't want to be too critical.
This would have been a great moment if every single person on this planet came back with, all right, well, here's a list of logical fallacies that I picked up from listening to your closing argument, and no, we're going to kill you both.
But I guess the most Cochrane-esque thing about this is the fact that it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
There's a
yeah,
rhyme
yeah.
at the end.
Yeah.
Is that your meta reading?
And also,
I mean,
that
it says, it is basically just a catchy line.
It
If
is,
my
it's
top
the
is
glove
cute, you
doesn't fit.
cannot execute.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I would say
you
that
must
the most,
acquit. Yeah.
the most Cochrane point about this is that they definitely did break the law. They're claiming not to, but they do they do get to go free.
The law is that you cannot fart, and I guess.
In looking at the OJ case, it's like, did OJ fart, quote unquote? Oh, OJ definitely farted, but Cochrane got OJ.
We all knew he farted. We all knew he did it.
We all know he farted at least twice.
And then Rick wrote his book, If I Farted.
Yeah, here's how I would do it.
Hypothetically.
People watch
And
this.
then later in the series, Rick gets arrested again. So, guys, it makes sense. The analogy follows through.
Whoa, is that what this whole show is about?
It's
It's one big OJ
It's
Simpson.
all about OJ. That's the whole show.
And then Morty's just Kato. Just
Yeah,
the dummy in the
that's
back.
why David Schwimmer keeps showing up and going, the juice!
There's one part that I didn't notice before that I want to point out I thought was particularly clever. So right when Summer is trying to convince Rick that, hey, you should let me come on this adventure. She says, I don't do it, or I'm sorry, Rick says, I don't do adventures with chicks, Summer. And Summer says, oh, right, because there's something about having a wiener that makes me better at walking through a hole. So obviously there's the suggestive nature of that joke.
Yep.
She then gets pulled through the portal, which is extra physical comedy. Then Rick follows her in, kills the beasts, and then we see, like, Summer emerge from one of the holes in the beast that Rick had just shot through.
Right.
I thought that was just like
there was a lot of just a lot of really smart stuff mixed in with that.
Absolutely.
There's a small moment in this episode that is I think one of the ways that this show excels in general, which is to really capture the world, because they world build every episode from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
And when he's trying to rebuild his portal gun with one hand because he's holding the gun to threaten the Gazorpians, and the one comes in and throws down, parts from these sex dolls, and then kind of walks in. Before he does that, Rick says, "Thanks, dummy." And then he kind of turns to Summer like, maybe I can get away with it now. And then he points the gun. I said, "Thanks, dummy."
Oh, yeah.
Even with him as a tyrant ruling over these people and he already has flags, their id is still so strong. They're just like, maybe now? Maybe I'll sneak in?
Yeah.
What do you mean they world build each episode from scratch?
Because everything takes place in a new, like the Purge
universe,
world is a new world
dimension,
build.
everything like that.
Jerry's daycare is a new world build. They're creating a new atmosphere for every episode to take place
when they
in.
watch TV, they have to do like 30 new worlds.
Exactly.
You're not saying that like the rules for the whole show change.
They just introduce new because every
yeah.
world exists in the same universe, but every world is its own encompassed set of laws and logic.
The moment you get there, Rick has to explain everything about the world before they can start the actual show.
And then begin to exploit everything.
Yes.
And it's that over and over again. They've found a way to take a formula that is classic sitcom, where it's like we start here and we end here, but they make it different for every episode because they're creating a new world.
Each endlessly fresh.
And each
amazingly good.
Each dimension's really just a joke. It's like a joke to each world is like, this is what the joke is for them, this is the joke is for them.
I will never stop laughing at the Jerry Daycare Center. I'm leaving. Okay, you always could. Goodbye.
I want to bring up one scene that I thought was particularly just tragic. Just like in the Rick and Morty is a very pessimistic show, and I felt like this is one that was particularly horrifying. So it's a scene where Beth and Jerry are trying to guide Morty in fatherhood.
Yep.
So there's three beats to this that all point to everything is fucked.
They're so good.
So first the baby starts crying, so Jerry becomes nurturing, and so when he's nurturing, he's basically saying, this is what Beth didn't do, and now to Summer, and because of that, Summer's going to become a stripper. And so we see in that the
resentment.
We see the resentment, but not only that, we see the flaws in their parenting. So in doing that, Jerry is too nurturing, and then Beth says, fuck it, give it to me, and then she just looks blankly at the baby and says, I am not rewarding this behavior. So she's too cold.
Right.
And then Morty takes the baby away and says, no, fuck this. I'm going to raise this baby. And then he turns on the TV.
Yeah.
As if to say the television's gonna be raising this child. And then I think both Beth and Jerry say, this kid has no hope.
Yeah. And at least that's something we can agree on.
And that scene just spoke to me because it's like, the child... All children, it's like all children are fucked. People are too broken.
Yeah.
And if you leave the media to raise your kid, will be fucked anyway. It's
joke,
like classic Rick and Morty.
Well, then when he says like
the kids raising kids, he's like, that's all you are, just kids raising kids. That's all we all are.
That was a punch in the gut.
I was just like, God damn.
Sometimes Morty is the greatest voice of human reason. I mean, I know that
especially
Rick
in season 3.
Yeah, he really his humanity comes out, and he's learned enough to be like, I understand that you are all full of shit. That's what Morty learns, at least over the first, I hope, first fifth of this series run. I'm hoping for 15 seasons, where it's just he's learning that he was stupid, but not nearly as stupid as he thought. He's a lot more informed, and he sees a lot more than people give him credit for, and part of that is because everybody else is so full of shit, and nobody knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
All right, so I think we're going to move into the mailbag.
Ooh, mailbag. Perfect for this episode.
I assume a lot of these questions are for me and Keith.
Yeah.
All of them. All right. So this is an email from, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Varun fuck me. Hey, Squanch.
Was that the last name?
Varun, fuck me.
Yeah. Hey, Squanch, love the podcast so far. It has taught me a lot of philosophical nuances that I've missed in Rick and Morty, and I've been eating this shit up like crazy. In this recent episode concerning Rick and Morty essentially destroying the world, I was surprised y'all didn't bring up the fact that Rick brought up he abandoned his daughter in the other universe. He seemed to show like 20 seconds of the thinking about it that he's so often against, and he very visibly represses his guilt for the situation after venting to Jaguar. Oh, okay, so this is season 3. What do y'all think about this? Also, I've always had some confusion about the C-137 aspect of the show since this episode. Were the dead Rick and Morty C-137, or is that the Rick and Morty we're following that just happened to slip in their place? P.S. I hate Rick as a character. He's a dick. LOL.
Wait, like really? How do you watch the show?
So
He is a dick.
as far as the C-137 thing, I don't think there's an answer here.
No.
Like, I think that he introduces himself as Rick C-137, but as far as if C-137 is the original one that is destroyed in Rick Potion number 9, I don't think we know.
I don't think there's any way of knowing yet.
Do you think there's a way that Rick and Morty is going to write themselves into a corner? Like, you think that's a possibility because there's just so many things going on at once?
I think that the answer to that is just to not give a shit about lore.
Well, I don't
why I'm
think they
like-
can physically. It's just kind of like they can
That's
literally
right.
make
New
anything.
dimensions. They can do
Yeah,
everything.
right.
It was
Right.
the first episode of season 3 where he's in jail and it's like there's no hope of escape, and then he just escapes. I was like, oh, okay, he's God.
Yeah.
Like it's officially crossed the line. He
Well,
can
they
do
actually,
anything.
They call him a fucked up god in that
yeah,
episode.
exactly.
So as far as your other question, Varun,
I mean, isn't the answer that he's probably done it before, and why do we think that this is
Yeah,
his original
exactly.
death? You know,
Yeah.
it's like he doesn't care.
But that's interesting because he only cares about original Morty. And they make that clear in the first season that like his attachment to every other member of his family, his attachment to Beth is stronger definitely than to some of the others, but with Morty there's something more going on that they keep hinting at and they don't get below the surface yet. I need to know what that is because he's
You don't think
much
it's just
more
a normal grandpa and
I think it is, but I want to know
relationship?
why that relationship shatters the facade that the other relationships can't.
the way I've always interpreted it is that it's the writers are always just fucking with us.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and that it's just like this constant seesaw of any time that any genuine connection is suggested, it's just immediately undercut. And it's just this game that they play with us.
Right.
And I think that that's probably going to be maintained for at least the next couple seasons.
Yeah.
If there's ever another season.
Oh, there's going to be 15.
Okay.
Jared, okay.
Harmon's right there. He's nodding yes. Great. He's nodding yes.
He's not.
He's been watching the whole time.
Right there, guys.
That
He's
was-
right there. This is, oh my god.
We
a
can't
band.
turn the cameras to see them, but he's right there.
Right. All right, this next one is from Jeff. He says, in the clip at the end of the episode, Jerry asks Beth if she ever wonders what happened to Rick and Morty. She replies, sometimes, but I'm ashamed to admit, now that they're gone, I'm finally happy. If Rick were still around, he could take out all the Cronenbergs no problem and start remaking Civilization, pushing Jerry back into irrelevance. Which makes it seem like the reason Jerry and Beth's relationship is on track is because Rick is gone, and Beth is acknowledging that the price of losing their son is worth it. So another dark look at love thrown in at the end. So the way that we've interpreted this at Wisecrack is largely that Jerry he's a buffoon, and he's just kind of this... He is a product of our kind of industrialized, alienated society, and now when you take all of the trappings of society away, he succeeds. So we see that. So we see like kind of two sides of that. So one in the Cronenberg world, even when we revisit Cronenberg world in season 3, episode 1, we see that he's a grizzled badass.
Yeah.
You know, once you take away all the comforts and the luxuries of society, he gets his shit together and he becomes a man.
He's capable as hell.
He's capable as hell. So I think that more than Rick and Morty leaving, I think that it's just that Jerry has been forced to become the alpha male that I guess supposedly was always hidden inside of him. Now, the other side of that is that we see at the beginning of season 3, episode 1, is that when the Galactic Federation is taken over, there's like the radically alienated version of Jerry who seems to succeed based on the fact that he is completely useless.
Yeah.
So I would say it's probably, I mean, my interpretation is it's more that necessarily than Rick and Morty being gone. What do you guys think?
There's definitely a toxic relationship aspect to Rick all over this show. That's like an
Yeah.
undeniable through line. It is interesting to me to think that the only person that can fix all the problems in this world is Rick, and then the only person who causes all the problems in this world is Rick. It feels possible that they're toying with that juxtaposition and that two-sided coin. I don't know. I've never thought about it as Rick is the reason, is like the root cause of the evil in this relationship, but I think there might be merit to that.
I think we see this explored a little bit in the Whirly Girly conspiracy in season 3 when Rick or Jerry confronts Rick about how you're ruining my marriage, you're the reason I'm kicked out of the house. And then during the roller coaster scene, Rick actually says, hey, you know what? I certainly haven't done any favors for your marriage. So, yeah, I mean, I guess without Rick sitting there belittling him, it probably helps.
It probably would have worked. Would it have been happy? Who knows?
There's also an interesting element to that of Beth, especially in season 3, is kind of caught between this choice of do I choose my father or do I choose my husband?
Yes.
And in a way, without Rick there, a combination of Rick not being there and the kind of post-apocalyptic world, Jerry's almost able to inhabit the
Rick
father
space.
figure Rick space.
Yeah.
I like that, the Rick space.
When they come back to the Cronenberg world in season 3, the scene that you're talking about, I did think it was a little weird that I get him being a badass now that he has to step up to the plate, but he kind of reverts back to like a caveman. He's like, this stinks of Rick. It's like I don't feel like you would regress as a person. Like
he feels threatened. It's not that he regresses as a person because he's in the Cronenberg world. It's that he finally has what he's been searching for this whole time, and now one of the pillars of his personality is being threatened by the resurgence of the character who took it away in the past, and so that causes him. This is my read.
To talk like a caveman?
Oh yeah, no, you're totally right on that. You're totally right on that.
Right. Yeah, I got nothing on that one.
Yeah, no, you're totally fucking right on that.
But, I mean, it's funny though. I mean, don't get me wrong.
All right, we got another installation of Rick and Morty porn names.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what this is, and yet I think I know what this is.
You're gonna get it. So these are from Daniel. Let's see what you got, Daniel. We got Rick and Morty.
Oh.
Hey, I like it. That was my first one, so now I can judge after these.
All right. Next one, Mr. Seek Dicks. Not bad.
Sorry.
This is
it shouldn't have been Mr. Me Seeks Dick.
Yes.
I think
Yes.
I at least appreciate him trying to get roughly the same amount of syllables.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so this one's actually one we've had before, but I'll say it again.
We're getting repeating already.
We're getting repeating ones.
It's awesome.
2 Ricks, 1 cup.
Already been there.
And you can just
Funny
do
the
two
first
This one,
times.
I like this one because this one is also a South Park reference, which is a show that's also dear to my heart. This is Backdoor Squanch 9.
That's pretty funny.
That's a good one.
That's pretty funny.
All right, so this one is a play on Debbie Does Dallas called Unity Uses Uranus.
Wow.
Would that have worked if I didn't introduce Debbie Does Dallas first?
Yeah, I would have, I think.
It would have taken me at least a few seconds, but I think it's way funnier with the introduction.
Yeah, I think it's kind of one of those jokes that needs an explanation. All right, so we're going to go into the last question of the mailbag. He says, love the last episode. I'm sorry. This is from Robert. Robert says, while you were talking about having a relationship with a simulated human and comparing that to a real-life human, a real-world comparison jumped out at me. Playing campaign mode versus playing multiplayer on a video game. We got the video game experts here.
There we go.
No matter how fucking impossible a boss may seem in campaign mode, eventually you'll learn his algorithmic behavior and crush him. Bizarrely, you'll still remember how to do this a decade later. Sniping those little mid-pubescent asshats repeatedly is so much more satisfying than cracking the code on a pre-programmed baddie. You can play multiplayer for literally hundreds of hours, but how many times can you really play through the campaign? This may be a less apt comparison as AI gets more advanced and the uncanny valley narrows, but extrapolating from what we know now, I think most humans would ultimately be unfulfilled by an algorithmic relationship. Last point, not everyone will be seeking fulfillment from simulations. Lots will be just seeking a warm, slippery spot to celebrate winning the Appley Award.
Well, wait, aren't they going to be advanced enough?
Warm,
to where-
slippery spot. Ew.
Well, yeah, so this just brings up the question of, to what point is the human brain just an algorithm, too? Just a really, really advanced one.
Oh, there's a great Radiolab episode about people who have short-term memory loss repeatedly after head trauma, where it's like your brain basically resets.
Like Memento style.
It's the Adam Sandler movie, Drew Barrymore.
That's it.
Yeah,
It's 50 First Dates. There's a great Radiolab episode called 50 First Dates.
The answer is 50 First Dates. Next question.
Sorry.
But they have audio of people who have woken up and are asking questions, and they ask the same questions. They respond the same way. It's just computer input and output, the same inflection in their voice, the same word choice over and over again. Where am I? Wait, but how did I get here? Where am I? Wait, but how did I get here? Just constantly. And it just makes them sound so much like computers that it's terrifying. And it made me question whether we all just are a bunch of ones and zeros.
So I guess I would
no
say
one would have ever thought that I could have done that. You know?
Oh,
planned that?
right, but
Hit him in the head, see if he does it again.
but there's a reason why you did it.
Whoa, yeah. Fuck.
Yeah.
God damn it.
All right. Any more thoughts on having a simulated lover?
I think that I think that like the example of the campaign mode and stuff, I get that, but that's a video game that you're playing now. In 10 years, 15 years, these algorithms are going to be so complex that it will feel like, you know, it won't. I don't think you'll be able to tell.
The algorithm will even be able to
you
simulate
won't be able to tell the algorithm
humans' flaws and all
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
I feel like a campaign is you in a relationship and multiplayer is you dating. Because like campaign
That's
is just
good.
like you're comfortable, you know what to do, you know how to play, and then once you get into multiplayer, you're like, everybody's different. I don't know what am I good? Is that like what? It's the whole thing of it.
It's not about am I a good player? Are we good players
together? Was that a bad day? Is it gonna keep being bad? Eventually, we'll get good.
Do they have like a Tinder for like co-op and stuff like that?
Oh my God,
like-
make that,
Yeah,
guys!
seriously,
Watch
guys,
it.
Oh,
guys.
Doing that.
You know, I'm looking for like a co-op partner in Salt and Sanctuary. You know, like, swipe at me, you know?
Yeah, I totally get what that means.
You'd only have your avatar on there, right?
Yeah.
Because who cares what people really look like?
Right. That's right. Yeah, or your stats.
Yeah, that's
Stats
right.
would be way
yeah.
more important. No pictures, just a bunch of stats and completion times for other video games.
There are
And
points
trophies.
when I play online with somebody and there's no talking or anything, and then you kind of realize you've been playing with a stranger for 3 hours and they disappear. You're kind of like, oh damn, I should have gotten that person's like information. Like there was a moment you're like, most times you play online games with randos, you're like, this is terrible, I hate this experience. But every once in a while you'll find somebody that you're like, huh, did my significant other just bail? Like, am I never gonna see this person again?
That's why whenever I'm playing co-op with strangers and my microphone's hooked up, right before they sign off, I go, I love you. And I just
Jared, I believe video game Tinder co-op is $1 billion idea.
dude, I
$1
think
billion
you just cracked the code.
You should
for
definitely
real.
do that.
Man, well, I guess the editor's going to have to edit this out. So nobody steals my idea. All right, I want to thank Jesse and Keith for joining us on the Squanch Day.
Oh, dude, thank you so
Thank you so much for
Thank you
having
for
us.
having us in Dan Harmon's basement.
Thank
Oh,
you.
first of all, our pleasure, and thanks for doing the show. You guys are so fucking
You guys are
smart
so
and
great.
wonderful.
Oh,
I
this
love
is
being
so
here.
awesome. Thank you so much.
No, you guys too. So, guys, definitely check out Jesse and Keith's podcast. A new player has joined. Not only because I'm going to be on an episode soon, but because these guys are super insightful. And, like, to be honest, when I came into this room, I was like, man, these guys are too good looking to like games. And they proved me wrong.
I had that thought because I don't know a lot about video games. And when I was expecting the people,
guy-
and I saw them walk in, he's like, "Yeah, I gotta go do some boxing after
Yeah,
this."
this
I was
guy
like, "What the
Jesse's a
fuck?"
boxing trainer, but then he boxes in the morning and then plays Persona 5 at night.
I play way more Persona 5 than I bought.
It's a definitely unique cast of characters. So definitely check out their podcast. We try to talk about Kingdom Hearts, but I ended up hijacking the conversation talking about Final
No,
Fantasy.
dude, it was fucking great.
It was
Thank you so
fantastic.
much.
Thank you so much.
All right, cool, guys. All right, well, that does it for today. Be sure to, let me give out some shout-outs. First of all, give us a review on iTunes. Feels very good to do so. I've done it before. Secondly, check out our movie podcast, Show Me the Meaning. This week, we are doing the David Fincher film Zodiac. I almost said Zardoz. So we're doing Zodiac, so check that out. Last week we did Inception, and that was super fun. And be sure to check out our awesome subscriber service, wisecrackplus.com. You will be very pleasantly surprised. Where can we find you guys on the internet?
Oh, you can find us at Twitter at New Player Has Joined.
Or New Player Pod.
New Player Pod. And you can find us at our website, newplayerhasjoined.com.
On Instagram, New Player Pod, at New Player Podcast.
And just Google New Player Has Joined, and you will find all our stuff. You'll see Jesse and I as Link and Mega Man.
Yep.
And yeah, find us out. If you like video games, if you love video games, and you love comedians, you love listening to people talk about it, our whole show is just about bringing celebrity on, comedians. They talk about their absolute favorite video games.
Why they attached emotionally to it. All that good stuff.
Yeah, so come hang out, talk about video games. You'll listen to Jared talk about Final Fantasy. And it was honestly like the most fun episode because we finally get to talk about Square Enix. It was fantastic.
It was so good. So good. Come back. Come back, Jared.
Come back, Jared.
I'll be here. Jesse, how about you? Oh, all right.
I mean, that's
us.
If you want to, I mean, I used to be on Twitter doing stuff, and I'm just like, just fucking listen to the podcast.
Just go.
Michael, when are you going to create the @DrNihilism handle?
Yeah, what the fuck?
Oh, yeah. Never. Absolutely not.
Of course not, because he doesn't care about the rewards.
Right.
Life is meaningless,
That's
so
right.
why would he create anything?
Someone gets me.
Do you want to plug Mike O'Brien?
Yeah, I think if you just type in Michael Burns on Twitter, I pop up because I think I might be the Michael Burns with the most followers.
Ooh, yo,
nice.
take that every other Michael Burns. Fuck yourself.
And there's one or two others. Ryan?
Follow Ryan Shorts on Facebook or YouTube. I make short, weird comedy video in my garage every week. Or Ryan's Game Show. It's my game show.
Cool. You can follow me at Wisecrack on Twitter, friend me on Facebook, or my collection of dog photos at Father of Woody on
Fuck
Instagram.
yeah.
That's awesome.
Highly
Wait,
recommend
what
you
kind of
follow
dog?
that shit.
He's a Maltese poodle mix.
That's
Yes.
awesome.
Yeah.
About yay big?
About exactly
Yep.
yay.
I haven't seen you walk. I haven't seen you walking around with the dog. I'm really sad.
I'm
about
around the hood. Yeah.
Around the hood. That's right. We live like down the street from you.
That's right. That's right. All right, guys. That's it for today. Thanks, guys.
Squanch you later, baby.
Bye.
Just goodbye for me.
Yeah, I didn't know we were supposed to say something.